we're going to talk briefly about succession. And there's two kinds. There's primary succession and secondary succession, and we'll explain the difference in a minute. Let's talk about primary succession first. So primary succession always occurs when you have an area where there is nothing living there previously. So there's nothing living in this area before, and all of a sudden you start to gradually get living things moving into the area, and then it becomes more and more developed. So here we can see exposed rock. So there's probably nothing living there before. So maybe there's a big glacier covering this rock, and then the glacier receded, leaving it bare. So there's nothing living there before. But over time, you might see some lichens and mosses pop up, and then over a greater period of time, you'll eventually see some shrubs, and then over a really long period of time, you'll eventually see trees, a forest of some kind. Now, a couple of important terms to know here. We've got the pioneer community, and we've got the climax community. Now, climax from your studies in English should, indicate it's kind of near the end, or yeah, it would be a good term, it's kind of near the end. And pioneer, pioneer is someone who's kind of there at the beginning. Well, that's what the pioneer community is. It's the first group of organisms that tend to move into an area like this. So the lichens and the mosses would be the pioneer community. Now, at the end, when we have this forest, things aren't really going to change anymore. It's kind of stable at this point. The process of succession is pretty much complete. So the organisms that you see at the end of the succession process, when it's not really changing anymore, is called the climax community. Now again, this is primary succession because there was nothing living in this area before. Now in contrast to that, we have secondary succession. Secondary succession is when you did have something living in that area before, but it was wiped out. So here we've got a perfectly good forest, but because of carelessness or a lightning strike or whatever, we have a forest fire, and that wipes out that whole area. Okay, so over time, we're going to have nothing living there, but eventually we'll start to see a few shrubs and stuff move in there, and again, that's the pioneer species. That's the first group of species to move into the area. And then we're going to get, from the shrubs, we're going to get a few bushes, and then some intermediate species, and eventually we're going to have that forest again. And the forest is when it's most stable. That's the climax community, which is the community that you see at the end of the successional process. But again, this is secondary succession, and secondary succession is when you did have something living there before, but is wiped out and we're starting again. Primary succession is when you're starting from scratch. There was nothing there before.